everyone, good morning and welcome to today's The Hindu News Analysis. In today's video, we'll be analyzing about 7 important news articles from the Hindu newspaper today. Myself Nitin K. Biju, I'll be appearing for the civil service interview this year. Now, before going to the article, I would like you to pause for a second and try to attempt the question by yourself. After discussing the relevant article, we'll come back to the practice question again. Coming to the first article, RBI opens 50,000 crore liquidity tap for mutual funds. MF means mutual funds, right? So what is it all about? The Reserve Bank of India, it has announced a special window of 50,000 crore for mutual funds in view of the redemption pressure that the fund houses are facing. So what is the issue? Recently we might have come to know about the issue where a mutual fund company named Franklin Templeton, it has shut down 6 of its debt funds, right? So because of that, uh, it has done so because of the liquidity crisis and the redemption pressures. What is liquidity crisis? The non availability of the cash, right? And what is the redemption pressure? Redemption pressure is the people who are invested in the mutual funds, they want their money back. That is called as redemption pressure. And since the mutual funds are not having the money to give it back to the investors, what the RBI has done, the RBI has decided to give 50,000 crore window. It will give the banks first, the RBI will give the banks this much of loan so that the banks can help the mutual funds to have more cash with them. That is the idea here. While announcing the window, the RBI said that the liquidity stress was limited to high risk debt funds and the larger industry remains liquid. RBI is telling that there is no need to worry because only the large risk debt funds are affected. So what is this large risk debt funds? Large risk debt funds are debt funds where the credit rating is very low. As we all know, every bond or equity, they have a credit rating, right? Credit rating implies that how safe it is to invest there. So if the credit rating is high, for example, the government, if the government gives some bonds and all, then definitely the confidence is more, the trust is more, right? So the credit rating will be high there. But for companies, the new companies which are just came and they have just giving out their bonds, we are not sure whether the company will wind up soon or not, right? So there the credit ratings are very low and therefore the risk is high. So RBI is telling that the present crisis is limited to the high risk debt funds and other industry, that is the normal ones, are safe. Now, under the scheme, the RBI will conduct repo operations of 90-day tenor at the fixed repo rate. We know what is repo rate, repo operations. That is, the RBI is lending money to the banks. RBI is giving money to banks at a interest rate. Now, so that is the repo operation. Why this repo operation is done? So that the banks can provide money to the mutual funds, right? So funds availed under this facility will be used by banks exclusively for meeting the liquidity requirements of mutual funds. So this 50,000 crore rupees will be used only for the mutual funds. By extending them loans, the banks might give them loans, or they can even purchase their collateral of investment grade bonds, commercial papers, debentures and certificates of deposits, etc. So these are the economic concepts which you have to go back to the basics. The macroeconomic textbook of class 12, just find it and try to make a note of these important keywords, that is debentures, certificate of deposits, etc. So as I already told you, the move comes after the Franklin Templeton Mutual Fund the winding up of the mutual fund, when they decided to wind up 6 debt funds that have combined assets under management of nearly 26,000 crores on account of a illiquid and low rated instruments in the portfolio. So the crux is that they have wound up around 6 debt funds. Franklin Templeton, it is a US based company, they have wound up around 6 debt funds. Also, the fund house, that is Franklin Templeton, they said that they decided to wind up the schemes to preserve the value of the current levels. As we all know, due to the COVID pandemic, the values of shares, everything is coming down. So the Franklin Templeton is telling that in order to just maintain it at the current prices, they just decided to wind up those 6 debt funds, right? So we'll be discussing about this in another video. I'll be trying to make another video on Franklin Templeton issue. either today or tomorrow. Okay. Now, coming to the basics, what is a mutual fund? A mutual fund is a type of financial vehicle made up of a pool of money collected from many investors to invest in securities. That is, there is a company in between. I'm an investor. I want to invest in securities or shares, right? I want to invest in some companies, but I don't know anything about any companies. I don't know anything about equities. I don't know anything about bond, whatever it is. So what will I do? I will go to a mutual fund and I'll deposit my money there. Similarly, mutual fund will be collecting money from many investors, and that pooled money, the mutual fund will invest in various equities, various bonds, and all. So the mutual fund is like a mediator between the investors and the companies, right? Also, so what are the securities that are invested in? The securities can be equities, bonds, and even hybrid. So what is equity? If the money is invested to buy the shares of a company, the shares where we'll get the profit, then it is called as equity. If the money is invested in bonds, bonds means debt instruments where the return is fixed. That is, assume there is a bond which says that every year you will get 8% of return. So that is fixed interest rate, right? So that is called as bond. Whereas equity is the profit will vary depending on the ups and lows in the market. Also, there is a third kind of security, that is the hybrid. Hybrid can be a mix of equities as well as bonds. There is a fixed element also, as well as there is a variable element as in the equities. Okay, so that is all about the mutual fund. So this is the concept of mutual fund. From the top here, investors will pool their money, and the fund manager, that is the mutual fund, they will invest with securities, and the securities generate returns, and the returns, the profit, it is passed to the investors. So this is the concept of a mutual fund. Okay. Now coming to Franklin Templeton issue, we have already discussed. It has voluntarily decided to wind up 6 debt schemes, citing redemption pressure, lack of liquidity in the bond markets due to the coronavirus pandemic. And what is redemption pressure? Redemption describes the repayment of any money market fixed income security at or before the asset's maturity date. For example, I have deposited my money in one bond. Now, before the bond matures, I want my money back. So that is called a redemption. So what will happen to me? Will I get the whole money back? No, there will be a deduction in the money. I'll be facing loss. So the investors will be facing loss due to this issue now. Okay. Now coming back to the practice question, consider the following about mutual funds. A mutual fund is a type of financial vehicle made up of a pool of money collected from many investors to invest in securities. Statement 2. Mutual funds can invest only in equities. Which of the above statements are correct? So as we all know, first statement is correct because that is the definition. That is the definition of a mutual fund. Coming to the second statement, mutual funds can invest only in equities. Is it true? No, because there are three types of securities. There can be equities, there can be bonds, and there can be hybrids, right? So statement 2 is wrong. So only statement 1 is correct. So the answer is option A, only 1, right? I hope you understood the concept. Coming to the next article, India among the top 3 military spenders as per a report. So as we all know, reports are very important for prelims because every year usually there is one question from the topic of reports. So here the report being discussed is, which is marked here in green, the annual report Trends in World Military Expenditures 2019, and it is released by Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, that is SIPRI. It is a Swedish think tank. So coming to the details of the report, the global military expenditure rose to $1917 billion in 2019, with India and China emerging among the top 3 spenders. Okay, as per the research of SIPRI. Now, in 2019, China and India were respectively the second and the third largest military spenders in the world. So, China's military expenditure increased by 5.1% to $261 billion in 2019. And coming to India, our military expenditure grew by 6.8% in this year, rising to $71 billion. Right. So, which all are the other countries which are in the top 5? The other countries in the top 5 are, the first one is US. Second one is China, as we already told. Third is India. Fourth is Russia, and the fifth is Saudi Arabia. So, and these 5 countries, they constituted for around 62% of the global expenditure on military, right? So So why India's military expenditure is high? As we all know, India's tensions and rivalry with both Pakistan and China are the major reasons for its increased military spending, as we all know. And coming to the military expenditure as a percentage of the GDP, in absolute numbers we know that it is around 75 billion dollars. Coming as a percentage of GDP, it is around 2.4% of the gross domestic product of India. Okay, now in comparison, compared to Pakistan, how much is Pakistan's expenditure? Pakistan's military expenditure, it rose by around 70% over the decade to reach 10.3 billion, while the military burden is have increased from 3.4% of the GDP to 4% of the GDP. Why? Because see, Pakistan, though in absolute numbers, the military expenditure is much less than India. For example, it's only $10 billion when it compared to India, that is $70 billion. But since the Pakistan's economy is small compared to India, the pressure on the GDP becomes very high there. The pressure on the GDP is around 4% in Pakistan, whereas in India it is only 2.4%. Right. And Pakistan was at 24th position in 2019, whereas India is in third position. Also, last year, we might have read in the current affairs and all, like Saudi Arabia was in the third. Now India have overcome Saudi Arabia also. Okay, so that is all about the report. So here you have to just focus on the name of the report and who publishes it. Okay, that is very important. Now, coming to the next article, UN warns of a human rights disaster. So, what is this all about? We all know that due to this COVID-19 pandemic, there is a increasing power in the government. The governments are becoming all powerful now to do anything like lockdowns, emergencies, whatnot. So, here, because of this situation, the UN is warning that there can be a human rights disaster. So, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, called on countries to refrain from violating fundamental rights under the guise of exceptional or emergency measures. So, and she also told that any restriction should be necessary, proportionate, and non discriminatory. Necessary in the sense, it should be ultimate, like lockdown was a necessity, right? To control the pandemic, it should be necessary and it should be proportionate. Like it should be proportionate to the crisis which we are facing, not disproportionate to the crisis. Also, it should be non-discriminatory. It should apply for everyone, irrespective of any of their whether religion, caste, region, or whatever it is. It should be non-discriminatory. So why did they say this? Because there has been numerous reports from different regions that police and other security forces have been using excessive lethal force to make people abide by lockdowns and curfews. So we might have seen about many pictures where excessive force was used against the people. So that is the background here. So also she is telling that such violations have often been committed against people belonging to the poorest and the most vulnerable sections of the population. Right. So they have been shooting, detaining, abusing someone, all those things are there. Also, she also decried that mass arrest in some countries over curfew violations as both unnecessary as well as unsafe. Jails and prisons are high risk environments, right? Because there we can't practice social distancing, all those things. So it is high risk environment. So state should be focusing on releasing the people who are can be safely released rather than detaining more people. So that is what the UN Human Rights Commissioner is telling. So the UN Rights Chief also warned that efforts to rein in dangerous misinformation around the pandemic was some cases being used as an excuse to crack down on legitimate free speech also. So in the name of controlling misinformation, some governments are cracking down on free speech also, as we have seen in China. We have heard news that the doctor who whistleblowed about the issue was actually killed or something, so detained, killed. So these news we have heard. So countries like China are doing this. So this is what the United Nations is telling about. So we have seen the what is important for prelims is here is that the organization, that is the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, that office of UNHCHR, right? So what it aims to do, it aims to promote and protect human rights, and it is a part of UN, as the name itself suggests. Also, what is the framework of the working of this organization? It is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. So the organization was established in 1993 after the World Conference on Human Rights, and its headquarters are in Geneva, Switzerland, as well as New York City in US. Okay. Now coming to the next article. Violence rose after Afghan deal, says UN. So what is this Afghan deal all about? In February 29th, there was this deal between Afghanistan and no, I mean the Taliban and the United States regarding Afghan peace process, right? So the article is telling that the violence have surged in Afghanistan in the weeks after the US and the Taliban signed a deal. It was supposed to pave way for peace, but what happened? It has increased the violence after the deal, right? So there was a period of relative calm ahead of February 29. That is when the deal was about to be signed. Before the deal was about to be signed, there was some calm there. But after the deal had signed, the conflict has resumed almost as soon as the deal was signed, right? And even the Ramzan, the ceasefire during the Ramzan, it was also denied by the militant group, that is the Taliban. So here what we have to study is we have to study about the US Afghanistan Taliban peace deal. This is very important for mains in international relations under GS2. Also questions can be asked in prelims also. So coming to the US Taliban deal, the US and the Taliban have signed an agreement for bringing peace to Afghanistan after more than 18 years of conflict. So when did this conflict start? This conflict started in 2011 after, as you all know, September 2000, I mean 2001, I mean sorry. So as we all know, in September 2001 there was an attack in US, a terrorist attack in US, which is which have attacked the Pentagon, all those things, right? So after this, who conducted the attack? Al Qaeda conducted the attack. So after Al Qaeda conducted the attack, the US wanted to catch Al Qaeda, right? So but the Al Qaeda was in Al Qaeda members, they were in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan at that time was ruled by Taliban. So the US asked Taliban to hand over those people, but Taliban denied. So that started the war between this US and Taliban, right? So and that has continued for around 18 years as of now. So what is, there are some agreements which have been signed. What are the deal? Under the deal there have been some provisions, right? So we'll just go through the provisions now. So within the first 135 days of the deal, the US will reduce its forces in Afghanistan to 8600. Okay, with allies also drawing down their forces proportionately. So there is a target for 135 days. Also there is a deal for complete withdrawal, all troops within 14 months if the militants uphold the deal. So the first provision, the main provision, is the withdrawal of the troops by the US. And for that there are two sub targets, within 135 days and within 14 months. Coming to the next provision is, it also provides for a prisoner swap. Some 5,000 Taliban prisoners will be released, and Taliban will release some around 1,000 Afghan security force prisoners. So but what happened is, due to these escalations after the peace deal was signed, these things have not materialized. So the deal seems to be in a confusion. Now what will be the future of the deal? Will the American military withdraw from the area? So what if the American military withdraws? What will be the situation? The situation will become very bad for India, especially because Pakistan will be getting more advantage, China will be getting more advantage in Afghanistan. So also India's connectivity to the Central Asia will be affected, because we have already had some projects like there was a Chabahar port in Iran to connect through Afghanistan then to the Central Asia. So also India have invested in Afghanistan through Salma Dam, parliament construction. So and there were so these investments will be affected. So many things, many, so the deal is overall a bad signal for India. So please try to write a mains answer on how India might be affected by the US Taliban deal. Try to include many dimensions such as the investment, the political, the strategic security, right? The role of India, the I mean and in the potential of getting isolated in South Asia. So including many dimensions, try to write a mains answer for this. Okay, now coming to the editorial of the day. virtual yet open. So what is this editorial about? Amidst the national lockdown, the Supreme Court and several other courts have been holding virtual proceedings. Now, what is the concern here? A question of concern here is that, and the bar, the Supreme Court bar is having a concern whether the virtual courts have become the new normal, and whether it means that a move away from the idea of open courts towards technology based administration of justice without the physical presence of the lawyers and the litigants. So this is the concern here, whether we are too much depending on technology, whether we are too much, whether after the COVID-19 also will the court continue to do virtual courts instead of open courts. So the idea of open courts is very important, right, for justice delivery. Also, this concern has been increased because the Chief Justice of India emphasized that virtual courts are open courts too, because and they are not like closed. They are not closed or in like in camera proceedings. These are also open courts. So the Supreme Court Chief Justice is supporting virtual idea of virtual courts. Also, the a three-judge bench headed by the CJI, they also laid down broad norms for courts using video conferencing and ratified the validity of virtual judicial proceedings. So the support given by the Supreme Court Chief Justice for virtual courts and all have caused concern for the Supreme Court Bar Association, right? So now coming to the next point, the Supreme Court Bar Association has written to the CJI and the other judges that open court hearings should be restored at the earliest, subject to the course of the lockdown ending. So they're telling we should come back to the open courts. They have also a specific request that the proceedings that is held virtually as of now, right? The virtual courts, it should be live streamed so that the access is not limited to the lawyers only, but it is available to the litigants and to the public also. So as of now, what is the situation? The situation is that the video conference will be set up. The lawyers who are arguing the case, they'll be giving the passwords, right? And the lawyers will be logging in and the video conferencing will be happen. So this is the present situation. So here the issue is that even the people who are involved, the normal people, that is the litigants who are involved in the case, they also cannot see the case because they won't have the password with them. Also, it is very difficult for them to travel to the lawyer's office where the video conferencing is happening due to the lockdown issues and all. So that is the issue as of now. Now, so also the advocates appearing for a particular case, that is the lawyers, they're now barred from sharing the passwords given to them to join the proceedings to the video conference. The lawyers can't share the password even to the litigants, right? So so the article is telling that as the use of technology stepped up, court should consider other steps that will speed up the judicial process and reduce the courtroom crowding. So this is another other kind of reforms which can happen through technology. So before that, it is very important that the litigants also get access to the court proceedings which is happening, right? So that is very important. Also, coming to the other reforms, in the lower courts evidence could be recorded with the consent of parties by virtual means. In the higher courts, a system based on advanced submission of written briefs and allocation of time slots for oral arguments can be put in place. So these are some reforms which can be done using technology. So what the article is suggesting that definitely technology should be used, but there should not be over dependence on technology, thereby creating a wheel in the justice delivery. It should not happen also, but the technology should be used in a good manner, right? So that is the editorial which that is all about the editorial of today. Now coming to the next article, the script of disruption and a new order. So what is this article all about? The article is about the geopolitical and geoeconomic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the article is discussing various dimensions of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, coming to the article. Pandemics have often changed the world and reshaped the human society. Empires have collapsed. Commentators are already talking about the fundamental alterations in the governance and business norms. So here they are telling that in the history, pandemics have often changed the world. For examples, here you should provide examples if it is asked in the question, in the mains question. Here you can give examples like the Justinian plague resulted in the decline of the Byzantine Empire. The 1918 Spanish flu, it it caused the defeat of Germany in the First World War. Also, in 1930s there was another plague. It caused the decline of the church as an institution. Right. So these kind of examples can be given to substantiate the statement that pandemics have often changed the world and reshaped the human societies. So there is already concern of the diminution of human values that could occur. Along with that, the idea of an international community might cease to exist. Now each nations are tending to look towards itself, concentrating its own narrow national interest, right? Now coming to the first dimension here, institutions under fire. So here they are talking about the world institutions, how their roles have declined. So as we already know, the role of the United Nations, the United Nations Security Council, and even the WHO are seen to, they are institutions which are seen to be failed as of now. The UNSC is attacked for being slow in responding to the pandemic. Also the WHO is being attacked, telling that they couldn't gauge the extent of the pandemic, right? So they are telling that the international institutions will decline in the future. And coming to the economic dimension, on the economic front, the World Bank has already predicted negative growth rate for most nations of the world. Coming to India, India's growth rate is also predicted as a low, around 1.5 to 2.8 percentage. Right. Now coming to the role of the state, as we all know, the states have become all powerful now. The private sector is virtually nowhere now, right? So the states have become powerful in giving everything like healthcare, also the essential items also. So the state is involved in anything, so it is likely to continue. The role of state as an enforcer of public good will almost certainly become greatly enhanced, right? Also, the trend is already becoming evident to some great extent across the world. For example, in Europe and even US, it is an area where individuals are given more freedom, liberty. But now the governments, the more state control is being supported in the US and Europe also. So post COVID-19, the world may have to pay a heavy price in terms of loss of liberty, right? So that is about the one aspect. Now coming to the another dimension, China in the spotlight. So one nation, that is China, is presently seeking to gain the most advantage and benefit from the problems faced by the rest of the world in the wake of the epidemic. We have seen many areas where China is trying to take advantage of this. Which all are those areas? One is the South China Sea issue, where the China is increasing its aggression in the South China Sea. The other one is the economic area, where China is trying to take stakes and shares of companies at the present, as their values are very low due to the COVID pandemic. Also they are trying to sell their manufactured goods, especially the health equipments, to various countries. So China is trying to take maximum advantage in every possible dimensions, right? Now more importantly, it is seeking to convert its failure into a significant opportunity. As we all know, China is the first place where the COVID pandemic happened, and it has failed in controlling the pandemic, because the first case was there in December 1st, but only in the second week of Jan 2020 they warned the world, right? So it has been failed. Now it is taking advantage of its own failure. Also it is trying to take advantage of its early recovery to by using its manufacturing capability, as we have already discussed. And regarding the acquisition of financial assets in the uh, other countries, so that also we have discussed now. So China is preparing for a China-centric multilateral globalization framework. So this dimension is about China. Now coming to the faltering West, that is the failures of the West. One distinct possibility is that COVID-19 would effectively put paid to existing global order that existed since the late 1940s. What is that? The dominance of United States. The United States is already seen as a failing state, right? Because it was not able to do anything. Sorry, it was not able to do anything. Also the European countries are also not able to effectively provide a solution to any of the issues faced by the world now. And coming to West Asia and India dimension, West Asian countries which are mainly dependent on oil, like Saudi Arabia, Iran, they are poised to decline because of the oil price meltdown. We have seen that the oil prices are declining due to the less demand. No one is taking vehicles outside now, so the petrol prices are declining. So all those issues will affect the countries like Saudi and Iran. In the meanwhile, due to the economic issues, India will also become weakened, right? So, and even in South Asia, India faces the risk of being isolated because China's power is increasing, Pakistan's power is increasing due to after the US withdrawal from the Afghanistan. So, and there is a increasing risk that India will become isolated. Also, India's leverage in the West Asia, it will also be diminished further with oil prices declining, and even the Indian communities there, they are being badly affected by the crisis. So many of the Indian communities there are seeking repatriation back to the host country. So it will affect India economically because India is one of the largest receiver of the remittances, right? So these are the main issues discussed by the article here. Coming to the last article, cost of doing business to see significant rise. As we already know, this is a very much expected issue in the economic front. The cost of doing business is set to go up as companies gear up to adhere to. There will be new safety and hygiene rules, right? Because of these rules, the cost of the businesses will be increasing. For example, in the case of saloons and all, where the human touch is very high, the cost is set to go up by 30 to 40%. Also, in the case of retail sector also, the cost will accelerate between anywhere between 10% to 50%. Also, due to practicing of social distancing, coming if we have to practice this properly, if we come to a 100,000 square feet store and if only 4 people are allowed to stand there in order to adhere to the social distance, then definitely the business of the stores will reduce, right? So it will again increase the cost of the services. Also, the large manufacturers and hotels and restaurants, the cost acceleration will be high. Also, now the focus will be more on contact-less service, where the physical contact is very less. And coming to another area is that the airlines and the airport operators, they will also face losses. Why? Because they have to take fewer passengers, possibly well below the existing capacity. For example, if in a flight, 3 people can sit in a row, then the airline should reduce it to 2 people, leaving the middle seat vacant. So these issues will definitely affect the airlines also. So every business, most of the businesses, the cost is way supposed to rise. So that is what the article is talking about. So I hope you like the video. Please subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and press the bell icon so that you will get instant updates. Have a great day. Thank you.